Hi everybody. In this chapter we're going to investigate the link between integrated marketing communications and branding. So this is lectures being presented by Charles Sturt University through Associate Professor David Gray. First thing I'd like to focus on are the kind of learning objectives. So we want to see how to build relationships with brands. Let's talk about the concept of brand identity, brand names, symbols, packaging, looking at concepts of brand audits, brand equity, brand health, and exploring the concept of engagement, and to see how databases act as a driver for integrated marketing communications. The overall map in this chapter, you can see there are a number of topics focusing on building brand relationships, and if you read the appropriate section of the chapter, you'll find those areas covered. I've also highlighted in this chapter some additional things which are not covered in the corresponding text. One of the initial questions is, can a nation be a brand? And the answer is, does a nation have the ability to attract certain kinds of customers? And of course the answer is yes. I mean, the example on this page relates to tourism, and you can see that different kinds of branding of products and services can be applied to cities, regions, or countries, or actually can be applied to different kinds of industries. One example is tourism, another example could be education. Now the way you measure the success of these campaigns will differ according to what it is that we're investigating. Now, for example, the United States in 2012 launched a tourism campaign to attract people to the United States. However, these campaigns can be upset, and as we saw with the election of Donald Trump last year, the level of international tourism to the United States in October last year, in 2016, declined by 6% on a year-on-year basis. And also this decline in tourism has continued even up to March 2017, when it dropped by a massive 16%. So branding campaigns can be successful, but they can also be, undone. Let's talk about building relationships with brands. So we know a brand is something we buy, something we avoid, something we aspire to, or something we outgrow. So we know that a brand, it's a perception resulting from experiences with and information about a company or a line of products and or services. So we know that one of the original definitions of branding was a brand can be defined as a name, a symbol, a logo, a trademark, and so forth that identifies and differentiates a product or service from other similar products or services. When we look at brands versus products and some of the major differentiating factors, so a brand is more than just a product or a service. It enables differentiation from its competitors. Brands can have tangible and intangible qualities. For example, a tangible quality might be the design, might be related to performance, function, size, shape, or price. Intangible aspects include things like value, image, channel image, or user perceptions. Now, brands have economic importance. Their worth, they have an economic value. They provide both value for business and brand utility for consumers. And so consumers may have both emotional and behavioral relationships with a brand. If we have a look at the the overall branding framework, we can go back to some of the earlier work by Keller and Lehman back in 2006, and we see in this chart here, so we see that the branding framework initially consists of marketing actions. So these are the actions that marketeers take towards building strong brands. It could be product innovation, manipulating the price, conducting advertising, engaging with social media promotion, and or the quality of the products itself. So there are a whole range of marketing actions, and if these marketing actions are successful, it will lead to a change in customer attitudes, feelings, and thoughts. And so the outcome of any effective brand building action is initially reflected in a change in customer attitudes, feelings, and thoughts. And so if we have a look at the middle section on this chart, we see customer perceptions and feelings towards a brand. They could be feelings of attachment. They could be the level of awareness, feelings of emotion, the association between the brand and its consumers, the overall image of the brand that consumers have of that brand, and the attitudes that they have. So if we're successful in changing customer attitudes, feelings, and thoughts, the aim of all this campaign is to change behaviour. And so the argument is that the benefits of positive brand association and attachment are ultimately reflected in consumer purchase behaviour. And of course, change behaviour, this has all kinds of financial marketing implications. So we know that brands are valuable, and some of the, for example, Millward Brown every year looks at the values of various brands, and you can see that Apple had $185 billion, and they're able to measure the change in brand value from 1 year to the next. Some of the different facets of a brand, if we start to look at brand identity, we look at the concept of the brand name, and a famous example is Google. We can look at some of the brand symbols, such as the W symbol for Woolworths in Australia, and also the brand identity can be affected by packaging as well for those tangible products. How do we measure the effectiveness of a brand? One way to do that is to conduct a brand audit, to analyze. We could also analyze brand equity. And there are lots of definitions in relation to brand equity. Two of the more notable ones are by Aker in 1991, which talks about a brand being a set of assets and liabilities linked to a brand, its name and symbol that add to or subtract from the value provided by a product or service to a firm and or to that firm's customers. So we're talking about association, brand assets and liabilities. Keller, on the other hand, back in 1993, defines brand equity as the differential effect of brand knowledge on consumer response to the marketing of the brand. And of course, we can also measure the brand through its brand relationships as well. So some of the major components of a brand audit, or strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, essentially, is when we go through. So we look at the inputs, such as customer profiles, the channel members, such as wholesalers and retailers, any partners that we have. We look at the influence of the brand on employees, the investment community, and a range of other stakeholders. So when we look, how do we actually assess the brand audit in relation to customers and prospects? We might look at our capacity to increase the pricing compared to non-branded products or our distribution. If we look at wholesalers and retailers, we might assess the level of quality and performance, etc. And then in relation to a brand audit, so after we've assessed each of the inputs, assessed how we're going to measure each of those inputs, then we're able to define our core values, our core competencies, and also our brand aspirations. And this enables us to determine the brand identity, personality, and the brand voice. And this allows us to articulate the brand promise and the value proposition. So typical brand audits can take 3 months to conduct a brand audit. It's quite an extensive proposition to conduct an overall brand audit, and is very, very common amongst some of the major corporations. So when we talk about brand equity is a marketing asset. And we start to look at things like brand awareness, the proprietary aspects of a brand. In other words, they can be patents, trademarks, etc., perceived brand quality, brand associations, and ultimately the aim is to build brand loyalty. And these are the 5 elements of brand equity. So when we look at how do we actually measure brand equity, we're talking about 3 major perspectives. Now, there's a lack of agreement on how brand equity is measured and the boundaries around it. So some of the major studies which have been undertaken, first of all, one approach is to look at the customer mindset measures of performance output. Now, these are subjective because they measure customer attitudes and perceptions towards a brand, such as awareness, association, and perceived quality. Another way of measuring brand equity are through product market outcomes. These are objectives, but they still reflect consumers' customers' perceptions towards a brand. Things like market share, the ability to charge a price premium, which really shows you how effective a brand can be, the revenue premium, and brand choice utility. So the third aspect of measuring brand equity are the financial market outcomes. So this allows us to judge brand performance based on its financial contributions, such as discounted cash flow valuation of licensing fees and royalties. Also, we can look at return on equity and return on assets. So the argument is that brand equity is the incremental cash flow that accrues to branded products over and above the cash flows that would result from the sale of unbranded products. We want to have a look at brand relationships. There are many other ways to measure a brand other than by its equity. You can also measure its value or relationship with consumers. So Young and Rubicam have a brand asset valuator which rates brands on key dimensions such as differentiation, relevance, esteem, and knowledge. The trouble with many of these brand valuation approaches is that they're black box consulting approaches, and one's never really sure how the measurement is done. So someone might give you a measure of $100 billion for, or $200 billion for Apple or versus Coke, etc. But what can you actually do with this? And I'm not sure that these approaches are all that helpful, given that it's not so easy to actually compute these measures. Let's have a look at the concept of brand equity versus brand value, and some of the research that I and my colleagues have done over recent years. So we're talking about brand equity referring to a consumer's perspectives towards a brand. So this represents what a brand means to consumers. However, brand value refers to what a brand means to the firm as a whole. And I mean, both brand equity and brand value, they're outcome-based measures, but brand equity can be seen as one of the drivers of brand value. And you can have a look at this chart over here. So you can see that individual level outcomes aggregate up to brand level, which then leads to brand value, and that affects shareholder value. So you can also see that the environment or the context in which the brand operates, the industry, the focus, also affects brand knowledge, and that leads to consumer-based brand equity, which also affects individual level outcomes. And so you can go from the environment in section B all the way through to brand value and shareholder value, because there are linkages between all of these components. So if we start to have a look at brand equity versus brand value, the major disadvantage of the existing customer market measures of brand equity is that they capture brand equity in just one point. So we're looking at the short-term impact of any marketing campaign on brand equity at one point of time. So the trouble is that brand equity is really an accumulation of marketing actions over a period of time, and it doesn't reflect all of the actions which have taken previously to result in an increase in brand equity. So we know that some marketing actions, such as advertising, may go beyond the current term and have a lagged impact. So if we want to measure the value of a brand, we need to look at both the short-term and the longer-term impacts. So some of the research that myself and my colleagues have been doing over recent years looks at measuring the brand health or the long-term performance of a brand, and we actually define brand health as the extent to which a brand has been able to experience a consistent sales growth over the long term. So there's not much point in having a brand if there are no measurable outcomes. So if you're in a non-profit business, it may be that you're raising funds, and that's the ultimate outcome. How successful are you over the long term in raising funds for that non-profit organisation? For a profit-based organisation, the ultimate goal is to sell more and consistently sell more over the long term. So when we look at the components of brand health, we're talking about brand growth and brand persistence. And we define brand growth as the extent to which current customers increase their spending and new customers are attracted to the brand with either existing or new products. The second component of brand health relates to brand consistence. It's defined as the extent to which a current customer franchise and its spending level can be sustained over time. If we talk about in practical terms, how do we actually measure this? And so my colleagues and I have developed a measure called the Brand Health Index. And if you have a look at the top of this left-hand side, you'll see that brand health equals the sum of growth divided by the standard deviation of growth. So the argument is that the more we grow and the less variability in that growth that there is, the greater the brand health. On the right-hand side, my colleagues and I conducted a study of healthy and unhealthy brands in higher education in England, and we were actually able to come up with a brand health index score for all of the major universities in England. So, for example, on the left-hand side, we identify the top 10 healthy brands of universities, and on the right-hand side, panel B, we look at the bottom unhealthy brands. The next thing we want to look at is customer equity. So we've looked at brand equity, we've looked at brand value, we've looked at brand health. Now we look at customer equity. And so we see that the core concept of customer equity is customer lifetime value. And we define it as the present value of all future profits generated from a customer. Number of people have defined it slightly differently. For example, Gupta defined it as the discount of future income stream derived from acquisition, retention, and expansion projections and their associated costs. So simply stated, brand equity is the aggregate value of the customer lifetime value of all current and future customers. So we can see that brand and customer assets, they're really two sides of the same coin. So brands can help customers make purchase decisions. Now, here are some of the major benefits of building a brand, because it lowers the cost of information search to customers and also the perceived risk. So we know that customer-oriented marketing actions such as telemarketing, door-to-door selling, direct mail, social media, etc. can be employed to develop long-term relationships with customers and increase their lifetime value. How do we measure customer equity? There have been a lot of complicated studies done over the years to actually measure customer equity, and it's still a contentious area. So basically what it says that any marketing action that we take can influence customers' attitudes, perceptions, and ultimately customer purchase behavior. So when we, from a study that we did back in 2016, we derived a method to calculate customer equity, and that requires 4 steps. The first step is that we know that annual sales generate sales margins. Secondly, these sales margins can generate stock returns. Thirdly, the stock returns reflect sales margin capitalization. And finally, customer equity can be approximated from the sales margin capitalization. If you want to see the basis of the study, you can read Mersey, Bowman, Johnson, and Gray in 2016. We looked at the impact of brand health on customer equity, and this is in the Journal of Retailing and Consumer Services. Now, some of the results showed that a 1 unit increase in brand health results in an 11% increase in customer equity in the airline. So we analysed a number of industries over a 10-year period. Also, we saw that building healthy brands has a positive 20% impact on customer equity in the banking industry. And the positive impact of brand health on customer equity is even stronger in department stores. So we can see that a 1 unit increase in brand health results in a 40% increase in customer equity in department store. So we can see that it's very, very important to build healthy brands to secure a greater cash flow and customer equity for any particular brand. So consumers engage with brands in many different ways. Marketeers have a lot of power to control many aspects of their brand through the brand name, the logo, and the packaging. But they can't control what the consumer thinks about a brand, what their friends tell them of their brand experience, or even what they read online. And this is a consumer's perspective. It's their brand image. So how consumers engage? There are emotional bonds that consumers have with brands, and there are behavioral bonds. So emotional bonds relate to a technique that evaluates how consumers feel about brands and the nature of any emotional rapport they have with a brand. And the behavioral bonds, this is essentially about loyalty. In other words, repetitive buying of particular products or services or particular brands over a long period of time. Some of the behavioral bonds that link a company to a customer or brand to a customer, things like consistency, accessibility, responsiveness, and commitment. So the customer's responses could be, if we're consistent, accessible, responsive, and committed to our customers, customers are more likely to trust us, they're more likely to like us, and they're more likely to be satisfied with the brand. In relation to behavioral bonds, basically what we're trying to do is to build brand credibility. And we can build brand credibility through building our cognitive links, the kinds of things that customers think about the brand, and also the affective connection, the emotional bonds, and these things. And you can see that the attitude strength is very important to building brand commitment, and this ultimately leads to building brand loyalty.